Hi everyone, welcome back to the Book Nook, the cozy corner for readers who love to dive deep into all things books. Whether you're all about annotating your paperbacks, obsessed with audiobooks, or can't stop scrolling through Book Talk, we're here to chat about everything bookish. I'm Desiree, reader and serial book collector, and I am so happy to be your co-host alongside my amazing friend and colleague, Cameron.
Hi everyone, I'm Cameron, and when I'm not working, I'm writing romance books that are usually set in Italy. And my first book, I'll Look For You Everywhere, came out this year if you want to add it to your want-to-read list.
Together, we're on the community and editorial teams at Fable, the free app for finding, reading, tracking, and chatting about books.
That's right, and we're so excited for today's episode because we get to chat with Dylan from Dylan Joseph Writes, previously known as Dylan's Reading on Instagram.
Dylan has been such an amazing presence within the bookish space on social media ever since he started his accounts back in 2024, sharing amazing book recs, cozy lifestyle content, and the best bookish hot takes. He's one of the few bookish creators that I trust with my bookshelves. He also moderates his own club on Fable, No Thoughts, Just Vibes, which you can join for free. I am so happy that you're here, Dylan. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is my first time being a guest on a podcast, so this is so exciting for me.
Oh, that's so fun. Oh, I'm so happy you're here. So I guess first question, I always want to know what you're reading. So anything exciting that you think we should add on our TBRs?
Well, it's a book that you guys can't, you can add it on your TBRs, but not your physical one just yet. It's Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. I'm sure you guys knew that was coming.
Yeah.
I have labeled myself as the #1 V.E. Schwab stan, and I don't let anyone tell me anything differently. And I slid in towards her publisher's DMs and asked for a copy, and they were so nice to give me one. And I took my time with it, absolutely devoured it, loved it. If you guys are into vampiric, dark kind of stories that span hundreds, thousands of years, you're going to eat this up. And dare I say, it's V.E. Schwab's best work so far. And that is coming from a Darker Shades of Magic stan. So I am absolutely loving that one, or I loved that one. But the book that I read most recently was The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. And some people might know I am very into Japanese literature and Southeast Asian literature. Live, laugh, love it. And it was very, very good. I am so looking forward to reading more dystopian literature this year, especially with everything going on right now. It kind of helped me reflect on a lot of things. So it was a great read. And for those of you that are a little bit, hesitant on Japanese literature or anything like that, I think this is a great introduction to it, especially if you want something that's a little bit longer, because I know they tend to be a little bit shorter. This is a great kind of, I would want to say beefier one, but it's a lengthier one that you can kind of sink your teeth into. So I loved that one.
Yeah, definitely. I can relate to that. I was introduced to the world of Japanese literature probably like 2 or 3 years ago, although I've always been a huge fan of it because my brother did a student exchange in Japan, and that's kind of how things kickstarted for me. But I did get The Memory Police when I saw you were reading it for your in-person book club, so I have yet to read it, but it is on my physical TBR, so I'm very excited for that one.
Love it. We'll have to discuss.
And I've seen V.E. Schwab's book everywhere, every person who has an arc, and I'm like, oh, I want it! Because I also loved A Darker Shade of Magic. But you always have such great recommendations. So I guess my next question was, are there any upcoming releases that you're excited about? You kind of already said that, but is there anything that even you haven't been able to get your hands on yet?
Yeah, I obviously Bury Our Bones for sure. But I actually am really, really excited for Emily Henry's new book. I have been, I've been an Emily Henry reader. I've read all of her books and I've enjoyed them. I wouldn't call myself a stan by any means, but I have enjoyed them. I love her writing style. But this one, I feel like it's kind of cryptic what it's fully about. I've only kind of seen blurbs and like bits and bobs online about what it's about. And it seems like this is going to be more of her foray into more adult romances, in my opinion, from what the vibe that I'm getting. And I'm really intrigued by it. I think she's going to give us something a little bit different than she has in the past few books that she's put out. And I mean, considering her growth from people we meet on vacation all the way to funny story, I can only expect that there's going to be so much more that she's going to be giving us in this book. So I'm really, really excited, especially because I haven't been reading too much contemporary romance lately. I'm kind of just ready to make that my next contemporary romance book that I'm excited about. So stoked for that one.
It's definitely on the most anticipated releases of the year. And I mean, we've had it on our radar because it's part of our job. We need to stay on track with like the hottest releases. But I'm also very excited to see, it's really nice to see how much an author grows with every single book they release, especially when you get to read their first book and just follow their progress throughout the entire way. So I'm very excited for that one. And I feel like all three of us will agree on this one, but very excited for the next Hunger Games release in a few weeks. So that's going to be insane. We have been begging for this book for so long. So I'm very excited to see how it unrolls.
You know, I'm so excited to kind of get into the mind of Haymitch, because we didn't really get too in depth in the trilogy, and I honestly I missed him. It's been we had a book without him in it, and I just miss him. I want to know more of his backstory, and I want to see. I've seen so many speculations and conspiracy theories, I guess, on like his involvement in the Hunger Games and how it progresses later on and stuff like that, and his relationships with the people around him. So I'm super, super excited.
Me too. I am right there with you. One more question and then we'll get into the actual interview section of this. Yeah. But because I love your bookish hot takes so much, I am slightly biased with this question, but what would be your favorite bookish hot take to chat about?
Okay. Yeah. I realize, especially lately, that's kind of been my shtick. And I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing. I'm not going to say it's a bad thing, but I'm just kind of owning it now. And lately I have been coming across a lot of hot takes that I've had opinions about. But I think the one that I've actually had a lot of conversations with people in real life and online about is I think we need to let go of the idea that every main character in a book needs to be likable and you need to like them as a character. And this was a conversation that came up when I recently read Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. If you're not super familiar, it's basically a book about this woman that steals a manuscript from someone and publishes it as her own, and kind of how everything unravels from that. It's a commentary on power. It's a commentary on the publishing industry and how elitist and inherently racist it is. And the main character in that is diabolical. She is horrendous. It's almost to the point where it's painful to read because she is so just annoying and frustrating, and it's mind-boggling that someone can kind of make these decisions and kind of be self-righteous in those decisions. And so I read that book and it just sparked a lot of conversation. And I think I love a good protagonist who makes questionable decisions, who's messy, who doesn't always say or do the right things. And some of the best, most compelling books that I've read are where characters aren't trying to be these moral compasses. They're just trying to survive or chase what they think that they want. And they don't always do it in a way that's admirable. But I think that's what makes them feel real. I think as readers, sometimes we expect characters to be better than we would be in their position. Because I think a lot of people reach towards literature to kind of put themselves in someone else's shoes, and they want to see like how someone else would handle a situation. We want them to be rational, self-aware, and learning from their mistakes. But in real life, people don't immediately grow just because they've made a bad decision. Sometimes they double down. I've had situations where I've made a bad decision and then I just keep making horrible decisions after that. It's like, it's bad. And I think watching a character go through that and watching them spiral and then facing the consequences, hopefully, that's what makes a character and a story feel super real to me. So I guess I can kind of say that the hot take is stop demanding characters be good and start asking if they're interesting, is kind of my hot take on that, because there's been a lot of reviews I myself have even talked about in the past, or a lot of people online, where it's, I didn't like this character, so 2 stars. And it's like, but especially with Yellowface, that's the point. The point is the character needed to be horrible. The character needed to be kind of the face of the overarching theme of the story. And if she weren't a horrible person, the theme of the story would have been lost. So yeah, I'd rather follow a flawed, deeply morally gray disaster of a character than a perfectly likable one any day.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
That is so interesting, because when I accidentally stumbled upon like my own reviews for my book once, and like 2 people had said, "Oh, like I don't like these characters, like they're not like doing things the right way." And I was like, that's literally the point. Like, come on. But obviously I can't like respond. So, but I totally feel that, and I am there with you on your bookish hot take.
It's honestly brave that you look at the reviews for your book. That would terrify
No,
me.
it was not intentional. I was actually doing something for Fable, and I just needed the link. And on the Fable website, like the reviews just show up, and and then obviously once I saw it, I had to finish reading it, which was a mistake. But never again. Never again.
Oh gosh, no, I can understand the stance on these kinds of, I guess, perspectives, because I've also been seeing a lot of reviews of people saying, like, I cannot stand this character, she's so unlikable. And I finished reading, it was just like a casual, fluffy romance, and I personally really enjoyed it because the character growth was so great, because she started off as being so closed off, and she was really cold to other people, and obviously she seemed unlikable because she was so cold, but there was a bunch of trauma behind why she was acting that way, and yet people were still saying, I can't stand her, she's just so cold and unlikable, and she's unrealistic, and it's part of the character, it's part of her character growth, right, of who she becomes by the end of the book, when she learns to be more comfortable in her own skin by meeting all of these other people and having her found family and dealing with her toxic relationship with her father. And anyways, so I can definitely understand where you're coming from with that one. So now we're going to get into, I guess, these were still like interviewee questions, but into the real juicy questions. So the first one I wanted to ask is just tell us about like your creator journey. As someone who was a lurker for probably like a year and a half before I actually hit post, I always love asking fellow creators kind of like, how long were you a lurker? What like sparked your interest into actually recording that first video and hitting post?
Gosh. Okay. Well, for one, I grew up in like prime Tumblr and YouTube days. Like that was my life as a teenager. And like in middle school, I was, always on Tumblr. I was coding my little theme, and I had ads on my blog at one point. Like I was like in it. And at that time, there was kind of this weird, especially with like YouTube and Instagram, because Instagram was like just starting to pop off and people were just starting to gain a lot of followers on there. There was this weird like elitism and unapproachability that came with being a content creator, because I think at that time people were really trying to be influencers. And that was kind of everyone's MO. So I lurked for a really long time. But then once I became more active in the bookish community, just following people and getting started in my own bookish journey, I saw that there were like a lot of gaps. Similar to like the beauty community, there's a lot of dialogue about authenticity and how a lot of people that you see with a lot of followers aren't super relatable anymore and don't represent the whole of a community. Like, for instance, most people don't read 15 books in a month. That's like not feasible for so many people. And most people are afraid to speak out about beloved books that they didn't like, because they're afraid of what people will say or how they will react. And so I saw that for a while, and that's ultimately what inspired me to kind of hit post on my first video was, I think my first reel that I ever posted was me, how I read like X amount of pages in a week, but then it was like 5 minutes long of me just rambling about like, you can read as much as you want. Like, don't use this number as a goal for you to reach every week. Like, some people have two jobs. They don't have the time or the energy to. And so that's kind of what sparked my journey online of just being like, read whatever you want to read, read how you like to, and that ultimately is what shaped my content moving forward. But I think like genuinely, I probably lurked for like a year and a half, maybe kind of similar to you, Desiree. And I feel like I wish I started sooner, to be honest. There's this weird energy of like, I don't want to put myself, I don't want to, my issue is I don't want to be perceived by people I don't know. That's like my biggest fear. But ultimately it was worth it. I'm sure you guys can say the same. So, I didn't look for super long, but I feel like I wish I started sooner.
That is so interesting to hear. And I feel like, yeah, like you were saying, we've all had a similar experience, especially like making that transition from lurker to creator. And I remember, like you were saying, that some people read like 15 books a month. I remember when I wanted to post, seeing that and being like, am I not going to be considered like a valid source of book recommendations? So that's so interesting. So I guess our next question would be, during your lurking period, like, is there a specific book that got you back into reading? Have you been a consistent reader your whole life? Like, what's sort of your journey with literature?
Um, well, one, I feel like people who love books and love to read typically go through these like ebbs and flows of devouring book after book after book. And then life gets busy, you're in school, you get a job or whatever it is, and then you kind of don't read as much and then you ramp up again. And that's kind of been my experience as a reader. So like I grew up with a single mom, so I had a lot of time alone as a kid. So I naturally gravitated towards books. And I mean, middle school, I grew up in the prime dystopian YA craze. So like Divergent, Maze Runner, Twilight. Twilight will always, it's literally behind me. Like, um, but ultimately, like, did I say Divergent? Yeah, I did. The Hunger Games, even though I love Theo James, but The Hunger Games is what really got me back into reading more avidly, I would say, as a teenager. But then the first book that I read as like a college-aged adult person was A Little Life. um, that's unfortunately, but fortunately, the book that kind of shaped who I am as a reader. And I don't think it necessarily sparked me to want to read more, but it sparked for me to kind of understand what I look for in books, and more so as a writer, because I've been a writer since I was a kid, like what kind of emotional impacts I want to have as a writer. And so ultimately, after reading A Little Life, it basically just sparked something in me that I didn't realize I'd lost. It turned reading for school and reading for sometimes pleasure to reading mostly for pleasure, because I found so much, oddly enough, joy reading A Little Life. Yeah, I cried like a little baby multiple times, and it took me months to read because it was so heavy. But it reminded me that books have the capability to do that. And so it just kind of propelled me on a trajectory forward.
Oh, I love that. I can relate. Like you said, there's always these phases where we're reading book after book and then we just can't pick up a book for the life of us. For me, it was when I got into high school. Like in middle school, the library was my favorite place on earth. I was best friends with the librarian. Usually kids could only take out one book. She would let me take out three. And then I hit high school and people were so judgmental of someone who would show up to class with a book, or like if during your break between classes you were reading a book, obviously you were like the biggest nerd and you weren't cool. But then book talk happened, the pandemic happened. I moved back home during like my second semester in first year of university. I was miserable and needed something to just like help me stay sane. And I think the first book I read, it was in 2021 in January, because I told myself I'm at least going to read like 2 books a month. And I picked up a Bridgerton book because the first season had just come out and I was like, you don't want to read this. And that just kind of got me into reading more regularly, and then I just sort of never went back. So I owe Bridgerton a whole lot. So the next question I wanted to ask you is, as a content creator, is there something that you enjoy the most out of it? Like, do you have a favorite part? Is it everything? Is there one specific thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I first started out, it was definitely like the filming. I loved filming and I loved editing, especially when I had a very very small following, a very humble following. I think I mainly took pride in the, like, I guess the production of it. Like, I really really enjoyed producing the content. And now, because I have, so many conversations with people that are following my content and part of, my little corner of the internet, I think creating and like fostering a community has 1000% been my favorite part, and is my favorite part. I think a lot of times we forget that social media, first and foremost, was created and is used to connect with others. It was, made to create communities and share with like-minded people, or unless it's Facebook, and to catch up with your aunt that you haven't seen in a year and a half. But I think now it's slowly steering away from it, but we're still kind of caught up in the influencerification, the yassification of it, and idolizing these people and stuff like that. But I think interacting with my audience, specifically having conversations in DMs or I'm always in my comments. Like, I am always responding to people. I love chatting with people about books and everything, and even just like having conversations with people. As we know, I tend to post hot takes, so having conversations with people that don't share my opinion, I actually really, really enjoy doing that. Have I caught myself getting in little feuds in my comments every once in a while? Unfortunately. But for the like 99.999% of the time, just having these conversations about books has been my favorite part, because similarly to writing, I feel like reading can be a very solitary venture. Like, you're usually like in your bed, in your room, at a cafe even, and people are like, oh, they don't want to be bothered because they're reading. And so having like my virtual book club where I can talk about books or be in my comments and my DMs and stuff has definitely been my favorite part, for sure.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think especially like because we're readers, I'm speaking for myself, but I'm a very introverted person by nature. So having those discussions with people in real life can be hard, especially like you said, if I'm just reading alone, like outside, no one's going to come up to me naturally. But that's why social media has really changed my life, because I've been able to show my personality and find people across the world who somehow, like me and are similar to me and share the same taste in books. So you're so right. And
I just
I
want to add
guess,
something really funny
yeah,
before you
of
ask your
course.
next question, Cameron. For context, Dylan, I have been following Cameron since I made my TikTok account, probably in like end of 2020. Cameron, when did you start posting?
I think 2020, it was definitely pandemic vibes.
Yeah, well, I've been following you since you started your accounts. I've been following like the entire trajectory of Cameron publishing her book. And so when Fable reached out to me to be an affiliate, like book club moderator, Cameron is the one who reached out. And I was like, I think I know this name. Who is this again? And then I realized that she was Chamber of Secret Books, and I like fangirled for a solid half an hour. And now I work with her, and we're hosting this podcast together. So it just goes to show how two very introverted people got to connect through this insane web of books on the internet, and it's one of the biggest blessings in my life because, like Cameron, I am such an introvert. I had such a hard time making friends in high school, and even when I got into university, like I graduated last year and I maybe had like 2 or 3 really close friends because I don't know how to make friends as an adult. Why, like, you can't invite someone on a play date, so you just, right? So I think posting on social media has helped me meet so many amazing people, both of you included, and it's honestly one of the best things ever. So I just wanted to add that little parentheses in there.
Yeah. I mean, I was definitely like, I don't know if you guys read Normal People, but I was Connell Waldron. Like, I had this set friends that I was born with in middle school, high school, and then once I got to university, I didn't know how to make friends alone. I had never been in a situation where I wasn't automatically surrounded by people that I've grown up with. So it was so hard. So I understand. But besides content creation, where do you see yourself, Dylan, in the next few months, years? What are your aspirations and goals? We're curious.
My aspirations change daily. It's like I had a coworker once call her thoughts that are just constantly going back and forth. She would call it mental plinko, and that's what I have. I have mental plinko with my aspirations. But overarching, I think short term, like I would love to continue what I'm doing, obviously. But I think like overall, like there is like a volatility to being a content creator, especially if you want to be someone that wants to make it like your full-time job. I don't know if I'm ever going to be at the point where I want to make it something full-time necessarily, but I think being able to transfer my experience and transfer, you know, the friendships I've made and everything like that to working in some sort of like bookish space is definitely something that I want to do. And then obviously I want to be hopefully a full-time writer. That's the goal, is being a full-time author, but it's hard to do. But I'm taking it one step at a time. I'm dreaming, but I don't want to say realistic, because having a dream of being an author is a realistic dream, but you know what I mean? But then long term, I'm actually drawing up business plans to open my own bookstore / tea bar concept. Yeah, I want to bring kind of I've seen a lot of articles, especially as of lately, about how, especially in the United States, there used to be this culture of a third place where you can, you have work, home, and then somewhere else you can go to. And we don't really have those anymore. Like we have cafes, but oftentimes it's like, oh, you can only sit there for an hour and then you have to buy something. And I kind of want to bring the third place back to our culture a little bit more and bring a combination of a library / bookstore and a cafe into my home community, and kind of specialize in catered tea selections and things like that. Because I have been a devout tea drinker for a very, very long time. I love tea. I love books. So why not merge those together? Plus, I've been a barista for a long time, so it kind of goes hand in hand. So
That's so exciting. Just catch me buying a plane ticket just to come and get a cup of tea. I swear I will be there. The second you have a launch date, please tell us, because I will buy the plane ticket. No, but that's so exciting. And honestly, whatever you do, I'm sure that you'll be great at it. And whatever happens, you'll get some really fun stories to tell. And that's just the way life is, right? If you have a dream, go for it. If it doesn't work out, at least you tried and you learned something from it, whether it's small or a big lesson. So that's a really exciting aspiration. And I'm sure that whenever it happens, it's going to be so great.
Oh, thanks. I think too, like, it's coming from a writer, and Cameron, I'm sure you can sympathize. Like, even if something doesn't work out, you still have a story that you can use for inspiration later on. It's a story that might spiral into something else. Like, I draw a lot of inspiration from my personal life in my writing, and a lot of stuff from the books that I read. And so everything's a journey, everything's a story to tell. So
Exactly.
Absolutely. I know that we have chatted about this just like a little bit, like on social media, but I'd love to know how you deal with a creative rut. I know that you went through like a little phase where short form content was just really frustrating, which I can really empathize with, because I talk a lot, and how do you want me to fit all of the things I have to say in a 1-minute video? If it goes over a minute, no one's going to watch it. So how do you deal with that frustration? How do you deal with a creative rut? Do you have any tips and tricks?
I think I do. And I think, like, it's funny that you mentioned how I had my, like, someone called it my, like, mini mental breakdown online, where I was, like, so over short form content. And it's true. Like, I had my Trisha Paytas moment where I was sitting on the floor crying. And I think, like, for me, I don't want to say controversial way of dealing with it, but I think it's something that people tend to like frown upon a little bit, especially if you're a creative, because I feel like a lot of people tell you to push through it, push through that creative rut, to create even when you don't want to. Because you have to keep kind of the ball rolling. You have to, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it type situation.
Yeah.
And for me personally, I found that when I'm in a creative rut, it's my mind and my body telling me that I've used up my creative energy. Like it needs to, it's kind of like, as introverted people, we have a social battery. Once it's drained, we're like clocked out, we're done for the day, I need to go home and rot. That's me with my creativity as well. I'm a firm believer that creativity is not an endless well. You can use it up and it can take a long time or a short amount of time to fill back up again. But ultimately, it's important to let the rain fill up that well again. But I also think that thinking is just as powerful as creating, or I guess thinking about creating is just as powerful as creating. And so when I'm in these creative ruts, instead of berating myself for not creating, I just give myself the time to think about the things that I want to create. And sometimes I will say that does spiral into kind of the making myself feel guilty for not creating, because I have this energy, or I want to have this energy to create something, but I don't have it. But a lot of times I think just fulfilling that drive to create by just thinking about it when I don't have the energy to definitely helps me take the pressure off of myself, especially when it comes to physically creating. Because, I mean, writing in and of itself and creating content is draining. Like, especially when you're a content creator, you have to create the content, you have to edit the content, but then you have to spend a lot of time interacting with your audience after that. And strangely enough, I still find myself getting like socially drained engaging online, which is so like, I would never think that would be a thing, but it gets not necessarily like physically tiring, because you have your phone like this close to your face and you're typing and you're swiping around and all that stuff. But I run out of things to say, and I don't want to be a generic person that responds with, the same thing to everyone. But if I run out of things to say, I run out of things to say. So, yeah.
That's amazing. And your analogy about the well, that really spoke to my soul.
Oh,
And
Wow.
I similarly feel guilty if I'm not posting, but also then I'll have literally nothing to say. And I remember at the beginning of my journey with TikTok, I was determined to post every day, 3 times a day, because I saw that's the cadence of other creators. And that ultimately led me to not posting for probably like a few months, and that's like the longest I've gone without posting, because I had used up everything. There was literally nothing left. So I think that's important for people to hear, whether we're talking about writing or creating content, that you don't have to do it every day. Like, you don't, I think that's a myth as well, that, you have to push through it. I think sometimes also just absorbing other creative things, media, books, always helps me feel inspired. And that's sort of what I do when I personally can't write. I'll find an author or book that I know will evoke some sort of emotion in me, and immediately I'm like, ooh, now I want to create. Like, I want to write. So, such great advice.
Yeah, I think all three of us can relate to just you're creating, you keep on creating, and then you hit a wall. Literally, that's what it is. You just don't have anything else to say, so why should you keep on posting? But for me, my journey started off quite different. I started a small business on Etsy, and I started posting about it, and it went viral. And then it was just keep on posting about the business. And then people started asking for book recommendations, so I started adding that to it. And then I closed the business in 2023, and then I was like, well, I'll keep the accounts, I guess. I'll keep on posting about books. And it kind of worked, but then it started slowing down. And I think I've been dealing with this sort of imposter syndrome for like the past 2 years of, I started off as a business, and now I'm just like, I'm talking about books, I'm talking about my life. After graduation and just working from home and working multiple jobs to reach X goals, and it's just like do I still deserve a place here or not? And then you just keep on hitting that creative rut or that wall that's just in your way. But I do relate with just consuming other media and just trying to find inspiration elsewhere, and also just giving yourself a break, because you should not be spending your entire day just thinking about creating something and feeling forced. So yeah, that was just my tidbit about it.
Yeah, and I need you to know, Desiree, you're not an imposter because first of all of us, if as long as you enjoy reading, you have every right to post online, and or whatever niche you're a part of. And I'm always screenshotting your recommendations.
Oh,
So
thank you. That's
Same.
yeah, and same with Dylan and both of you. So I this is a good shift now that we're like talking about books again. We need to know your top five favorite books and
please.
kind of why.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
think I know two of them at least for sure.
Yeah,
I
same.
You
have
could
one of them right
I
here.
see it. I saw that earlier and I was like, oh, the way that my eyes literally went straight to it is crazy.
Yeah, I placed it there specifically for this call because
Oh
I
my
knew you
gosh.
would spot it.
That's
So
so cute.
Okay. So I talked about, actually I did talk about a few already, but A Little Life, by Hanya Yanagihara. That book made me want to pursue writing as like a potential career in the future. I found that like a lot of my favorite books, I've drawn specific connections to, not necessarily just like, oh, that was a 5-star for me because I live, laugh, loved it. It was more like this opened my eyes to something. This made me think that X was possible, that type of thing. And so A Little Life, it of course is, I'm going to say it's traumatic to read because it is. But again, like I said earlier, I think a book having that sort of impact on you, it's impossible to not think of it as inspiration for what the written word can do. And then I'm cheating a little bit. I'm considering a trilogy one.
okay,
And that's
that's
the Darker Shades of Magic trilogy. Sorry. That one opened me up to the idea that fantasy can have elements of literary fiction. It can have elements of magical realism. It's so much more than just personally what I think of, like Brandon Sanderson, Tolkien, like that kind of thing. There's way more to it. It's such a broad genre. And I didn't call myself a fantasy reader until I read the Darker Shades of Magic trilogy. So it opened me up to a whole new genre. And then obviously The Hunger Games, just because that was formative in my reading journey. And I think too, the fact that that trilogy still has such an impact on not only the people that read it back when it first was coming out and the movies were coming out, but the impact it has on us as adults in thinking about our government, thinking about the way that we live our lives, and how it's still, not that it's like super old, but how applicable it is to how we live our lives and how we think about the world around us. I absolutely love, I would consider that one a modern classic for sure. And then Summer Fridays, by Suzanne Rundell. That was actually the first book that got me out of my first major reading slump last year. And it showed me what a realistic relationship looks like in a romance. I think a lot of times romances it's like, here's the beginning and here's the end, or hopefully not the end, but like a resolution to a relationship. And I think in terms of romances, I like when a story feels like the beginning of a relationship and we don't fully get to know the ins and outs and the end of a relationship and how it ends. And I think Summer Fridays, because it ends on kind of an ambiguous ending, it felt a little bit more cathartic to me because it felt like a true relationship, because no one's going to really ever know what the end of a relationship is, even if you get divorced or you break up. Like, there's never truly an end to a relationship. And I think that novel kind of really honed that in for me. And then we're not surprised, it's another V.E. Schwab book, but The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue.
Oh, that's such a good one.
We love her. She's misunderstood. I could write a thesis on this book. Okay. I could write a thesis on its role in book talk and the book talk community. Like, I could go ham, but I'm not. It really just introduced me to magical realism and like speculative fiction type vibe. And my absolute love for it. Like, this is what introduced me to that kind of genre. And it opened my eyes to, I don't want to say, because like if you've read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, you know that it's a plot that is very, I don't want to say a soft plot, but that's kind of what I want to call it, where there's nothing like super, super intense that happens at the midpoint where you're like, whoa, the stakes are so high. Like, where could we go from here? It's more like it represented what the main character's journey through life was. And it felt just magical. I loved it. I don't know what else to say. I love that book. I'm planning on rereading it soon. I'm going through a whole like V.E. Schwab reread moment because I'm seeing her on tour in June. So I just need to be prepared to fangirl towards her, I guess, as if I don't do that online already. So
Oh no, that's so great. I read Addie last April. I was on a getaway trip with one of my best friends, and I just like, I had maybe like 20 pages left of it, and I was reading in bed, and I stayed up until like 1 in the morning to finish it because we went to bed late. And I have like, I love to film myself when I'm finishing a book that I know is gonna have like a really impactful ending. And I filmed myself basically bawling my eyes out for 20 minutes straight. And I made a TikTok for that. And that I think that had like, I don't know how many million views of people either saying, I'm buying that, and then replying to their own comments and saying, you were right. Or then people saying, like, it wasn't that sad. But, anyways, I was like completely changed after reading that book. And I haven't read all of V. Schwab's books, but I did read Gallant after that one, I think. But after seeing all your posts, Dylan, obviously I have acquired the goods. And I also found, which one is it? I found a signed copy of Vengeful at a secondhand bookstore, and I was just like, it was a first print edition signed by V. Schwab. Like in Canada, you don't find those around here. You hardly find any signed titles around here unless they're from a local author. So definitely relate to like the impact that Addie can have on a reader, because that was one hell of a ride.
Yeah. I like that as a bookish hot take. I love soft plots.
thank you.
Yeah,
Yep.
and sorry, I'm bringing up my book again because
Do it.
review
No,
that,
go
I
for it.
read that destroyed my life. She also said that oh, like nothing really happened in this book. And then I was reflecting on that, and I was like, my favorite books all have that in common. I love when it's just kind of, especially because it's a contemporary book. Like, I like books that just follow the trajectory of life. Like, sometimes you don't have these big events that happen.
No, this is great. And as someone who also loves normal people, because I saw you recommend it and I read it, it's so nice. And in some way, it's really refreshing to read a book that is literally just people living their lives. Because I look at my life and I'm not hiking a mountain every other day. I'm not living a massive milestone twice a week. I am just living life. I am just existing. I am getting through the day, and then I'm grateful that I get to be here, and I just go through life as it goes. And it's really refreshing to see books that depict that as it is, because it makes you feel seen. Like when I read Normal People and I saw, the introverted characters, and it was just like, oh, this is relatable. And like you said with Connell, when he goes into college and he didn't have his group of friends, and it's such a drastic shift. That was something I related to. And just that can be like the big thing in the story. It doesn't need to be something that's, putting your life in danger or slaying a massive dragon or, I don't know, something like that. You can just be living life, and that's enough.
Yeah.
So I totally understand. And then I've been waiting to ask this question since we started. Please tell us about your book. I know that you've already posted about it on socials, but I just want to hear it straight from you.
Yeah, this is my worst nightmare is talking about my book. Like having to summarize and like tell people what my book is about is horrifying. I don't know, like it's just impossible to do for some reason. So if I ramble in this, okay, great. I'm glad I have your permission to do
You're
that.
good. Go for it.
So My book is called The Lies We Tell, and I'm quoting it kind of as a literary suspense slash romance combo. It explores ambition, deception, and the cost of living a lie. But at its heart, it's about two writers, Dakota and Oliver, whose lives become entangled in ways neither of them expected. Dakota is a failed debut author working in publishing, desperate to prove that he belongs in the literary world. And Oliver is publishing's golden boy, I guess you could call him. He's brilliant, untouchable, and the heir to a literary dynasty. His late grandfather was a well-known author that I have kind of drawn inspiration from. He's kind of like my novel's Nicholas Sparks, if that makes sense. And their connection's immediate, it's intense, it's steamy, and it's full of promise. But as their relationship deepens, Dakota starts to sense that something's off with Oliver. He becomes erratic, guarded, and Dakota can sense this distance between them. And he can't quite navigate how to close that distance. And then Dakota finally uncovers that Oliver has been hiding something. And the truth threatens to destroy not just their relationship, but everything that Oliver has built for himself and his entire life around. The book plays with themes of like authenticity versus illusion, legacy versus identity, and the emotional toll of ambition. But overall, it kind of asks, what happens when the world believes a version of you that isn't real? And what happens to the people closest to you when the illusion starts to unravel? There's a lot of topics of like mental health, kind of like addiction, or like, I guess you could say coping mechanisms, and the stories that we tell to survive. It's a deeply emotional, I don't want to call it a love story, but it is a deeply emotional story about two men and a relationship that they find themselves in, and what comes out of that when the two of them are not necessarily honest with one another. Their relationship is intoxicating, all-consuming, but it's also super, super fragile. I don't want to give too much away, but I can say if you love morally gray characters, which you know I do, a slow burn literary tension, and a story about two flawed people finding each other at the wrong time, this is for you, for sure. I'm also giving the girly some steamy scenes because I'm sorry, I can write a good one. And so I'm really excited. It's definitely been really, really challenging. Writing a book is a feat, but I think, like I said earlier, I've been drawing a lot of inspiration from myself as a creative and things that I've grappled with and things that I've struggled with. And even like how we were talking about earlier about imposter syndrome, like imposter syndrome is definitely a major theme in this as well. But ultimately it's for writers, it's for book lovers. It takes place in the publishing scene in the Pacific Northwest. Like it's a great vibe. And I think it's kind of funny that we were talking about soft plots, because although it's a literary suspense, there's no point in the book where you're like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Like you don't really, it's a story about how two people connect. When there's high stakes involved, absolutely, but it's not the central point of the story, I guess. So yeah, I'm really excited to get it out there. It comes out in over a year. I gave a lot of notice just because I wanted to kind of build a lot of anticipation and slowly get everyone that, follows my content involved with these characters as I slowly start to put more kind of information out about it and stuff like that. So.
Oh, that's so
Incredible.
exciting. I am so, so, so excited for it.
Yeah, I was so captivated that whole time you were explaining it, and my jaw
Me
just kept
too.
consecutively getting larger. So, oh my God, just Dylan, if you're sending out any advance reader copies to anyone,
Coming out in the fall.
I just know two people that would love that. So,
I got you. Don't worry.
okay. And before we wrap up, we have two fun questions. And the first one is, if you could swap lives with a character for a week, who would it be?
Okay. There's going to be like an element of surprise and not surprise. So it's a character from the Darker Shades of Magic trilogy. Whatever. But the character is Rye. Rye is the not blood-related brother of the main character, especially in the first book. And I think he's often just a forgotten and less appreciated character of the series. I just love his character progression. I love him as a character. And I think him and I share a lot of commonalities, actually. And a lot of times I feel like when people ask someone this question, you want to answer it with a character that has this insane journey or has these fun magical abilities or just a really cool story. And yeah, he has a really cool and unique story. But I think being a character like Rai, who doesn't have magic while his brother and family does, and a lot of the people around him do, would make for a great story and for like my own personal development. So yeah, I think Rai for sure. Maybe even Alucard, who is another character in that series, because he's like a pirate, kind of. I think it'd be cool to be a pirate. So
It's a great answer.
Yeah, I love that. And second question before we wrap up. If your bookshelves could talk, what secrets would they spill about you?
that's crazy. Okay. I feel like they'd probably more so just ask me if I was doing okay.
Oh, isn't that relatable?
Like one of the things that me and my audience laugh about all the time is how much I love like unhappy endings, sad storylines, realistic romances. And I think they wouldn't necessarily spill anything because they're too concerned for my well-being. But if I had to say something, they'd probably just spill the tea about what my desk looks like and how there's the amount of like half finished sparkling waters. There's like matcha everywhere, and there's like little snack bowls that have half eaten bits and bobs and everything. It's egregious. It's disgusting. But you know,
That's a sign of a true writer. Yeah.
true.
So true, Kami. It was so great having you here, Dylan. Thank you for answering all of our questions. Thank you for taking the time to be here. It was so great to have you as our second guest on the pod. And to all of our listeners, you can find Dylan at Dylan Joseph Writes across socials. And please make sure that you pre-order your copy of The Lies We Tell, because as Dylan has already told us, this is going to be an amazing read. I'm so excited for it. I can't wait for it to come out.
Me too. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on @GetFable on TikTok or @Fable on Instagram for more bookish content.
Thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you next time on the Book Nook.